Buying your first fishing rod can be so overwhelming sometimes because there's so many factors that go into fishing rods, like spinning versus conventional outfits, fast tip versus slow tip, heavy action versus light action, the length of your pole. There's so many different factors that go into a fishing rod, and it's really important that you guys make sure you have the right fishing rod for your fishing scenarios. That's why I'm here to help you guys out in only a couple minutes to know all the different factors that go into a fishing rod. That way you guys can make the best decision for your fishing scenarios. What is going on, guys? Ryan from Livin here, and welcome to the third episode of Work Smarter Not Harder, a series where I am helping you guys out in only a couple minutes per video to make better decisions when you guys are going out on the water to make for a more enjoyable time while you're out there. Now, diving right into today's topic of rods, we're gonna start by talking about spinning versus conventional rods. Now, right here, this is my inshore setup. This is a red bone rod matched with a Penn Battle 2. And this rod is a spinning rod. It has a spinning reel on it. It says it right on here. It says that is a spinning rod. And just a quick thing, the proper way to use this rod is to fish it like this, not holding it this way. Holding it this way is incorrect. Please, when you're using your spinning rods, use it this way. And here is my bottom fishing conventional setup. So I have my bottom fishing reel on here, and here is the rod that I have for my bottom fishing setup. Now, if you guys take a look at these two rods, there are a very big difference between the size of the handles on them, the thickness of the rods themselves, the rod length. You guys can't see the length, but the bottom one is a little bit longer than the top one. So I'm gonna help you guys out what all this kind of stuff means. So every rod is rated for a different tip action, whether it's a fast tip or a slow tip, very fast, very slow, moderate, everything in between. This is gonna vary depending on what kind of fishing you're doing, so you guys wanna make sure you pay attention to the action of the tip when you're purchasing a rod. The rod action is dependent upon when pressure is applied to the rod where it flexes, whether it's more at the tip or if it flexes more down here. So if you have a very fast action pull, then there's going to be flexing at the tip and not so much towards the butt of the rod. But if you have a very slow action rod, then a lot of the flexing is going to happen more towards the butt, and this rod will be doubled over completely. But generally, if you're gonna be fishing for bigger fish, you're gonna have more of a fast tip. And if you're gonna be fishing for smaller fish, you're gonna have a slower tip. That way, when you fight your smaller fish, your rod bends a little bit more. You can have a little bit more fun with it. Slower tips are also good for slinging lures out further compared to faster tips. So overall, you're gonna have a little bit better of a fight with a fish when you have a slower tip rod compared to a faster tip, but it does take a more skilled angler to use a slower tip rod. So this right here is the rod for my bottom fishing setup, which has a very fast tip because this rod is meant to catch big fish, and I need the fast tip to bring in those big fish. Now this right here is the rod for my slow pitch setup, which has a very slow tip, meaning that this is going to bend. You guys see that nice gradual bend, and I'm not gonna double over. I'll throw a picture on the screen, but these slow pitch rods will double over completely, pretty much almost fighting a fish at almost a 90-degree angle. And then these are a very special kind of pull for a special kind of fishery, but it's an extreme version of a slow action rod. So every rod also comes with a power rating. So the power rating is how tough the rod is and how big a fish basically you're gonna be able to handle with that kind of pull. So right here I have my two inshore setups from Redbone, and they both have their ratings on there. So if you guys look, the top rod has a medium rating and the bottom rod has a medium heavy rating. Now you're not gonna be able to tell on camera, but the medium heavy pole is a little bit thicker than the medium pole. And it, guys, it's just kind of self-explanatory with the power. The heavier the rating, the thicker the pole is going to be, the bigger the fish it's going to be able to hold. Just keep in mind that you don't want to just go by the heaviest power rating because that pole is not going to be very fun to fight fish. Personally, I think, and a lot of anglers like to fight fish on the lightest tackle setup that they can. So right now I'm using for my inshore setup the medium heavy power pole for my inshore setup, and I just think this medium is going to be a little too light. I haven't tested this pole out yet from Redbone, but I think I'm going to use it for snapper fishing and reef fishing. I think it'll be perfect for something like that. So we've talked about the power of the rod, we've talked about the action of the rod. Now we're going to talk about the length of the rod. Now the length of the rod can really vary from a tiny little kite rod all the way out to a 12-foot surf cast pole, which is insane to sling out your bait as far as you can into the surf. But usually the poles that I buy are around the 7-foot mark. My inshore setup I was showing you guys before is 7'6". Now some scenarios you guys might want to keep in mind is, like, for example, when you're fishing on a drift boat, the distance from the angler all the way to the water is pretty far because the drift boats tend to have really tall side gunnels. So you're gonna want a longer pole when you're fishing on a drift boat, probably about 8 feet. That way, if your fish decides to swim underneath the boat, you could stick your rod tip out as far as you can to avoid your line hitting the bottom of the boat. Hope that makes sense for you guys. Try to explain it the best way possible. But the same theory applies when you guys are bridge fishing. You want to be able to have a longer tip. That way you could stick it out as far as you can because you're not very close to the water. When you guys are fishing on regular size center consoles and stuff, it's not going to matter as much because you're able to, you're only a couple feet away from the water, so you could stick the rod tip into the water and avoid getting cut off by the bottom of the boat. When you guys are going to be doing a lot of casting with your pole, personally, I think the 7-foot to 7'6" range is perfect. It allows you to sling your lures on exactly where you want them. If you guys have too short of a pole, like a 6.5 or a 6-foot pole, it's not going to give you the right kind of sling that you want to be able to cast underneath docks or get your lure exactly where you want it. I've just found that casting out with a longer pole, the longest you can really honestly take with you, that's not like ridiculously long. Like, I think that 7'6" is kind of my max for the length that I want to use for inshore fishing. It allows me to get plenty of casting distance and still gives me a great fight. Now on the other extreme, when you guys are doing surf casting, don't really have much experience with this, so but they use very long poles. They're usually detachable. They're about 12 feet long. I think they get maybe even longer than that, but they're extremely long. That way they can get just a ginormous slingshot when they're casting it out into the surf because they're trying to send their baits way out. So the pole length really varies a lot. Just don't go out on your fishing boat with a 12-foot surf cast pole. If you're going to be going on a regular boat, just grab a nice 7 to 8-foot pole to use. And that's going to wrap this video up on everything you guys need to know about when buying poles. There's a ton more stuff that goes into poles, but I was just trying to keep this video as short as I could for you guys. And if you guys did enjoy it, make sure you hit the like button and consider subscribing down below. It really helps me out a lot. Until my next video, remember to keep living salty.